We live in an age that claims to worship truth. We demand transparency from our leaders, authenticity from our celebrities, and brutal honesty from our social media feeds. Yet somehow, we've created a world where speaking uncomfortable truths can destroy careers overnight, where one poorly worded tweet can end decades of achievement, and where the mob's digital pitchforks wait eagerly for the next transgression. How did we become so fragile? How did a civilization that prides itself on free speech become so terrified of its consequences? 700 years ago, there lived a class of people who solved this very problem. They spoke truth to power daily, not occasionally, not when it was safe, but as their very profession. They mocked king, exposed corruption, and revealed society's darkest hypocrisies. And they survived. These weren't brave revolutionaries or protected journalists. They were jesters, history's most sophisticated truth-tellers, disguised as fools. While we struggle to navigate office politics without triggering HR complaints, these medieval masters could critique absolute monarchs and live to joke another day. They possessed something we've lost: the psychological armor to withstand constant humiliation, the strategic intelligence to package devastating truths as harmless entertainment, and the emotional resilience to thrive under pressures that would break most modern minds. Today's executives study leadership seminars and communication workshops. Medieval jesters mastered something far more dangerous: the art of survival through strategic vulnerability. They understood power dynamics better than our modern consultants, and their techniques for managing hostile audiences would shame our best negotiators. The question haunting our fragmented age isn't whether we could entertain medieval courts, it's whether we could survive their brutal honesty.
Create your typical modern influencer. Perfect teeth, flawless skin, carefully curated lifestyle, desperate for likes and algorithmic approval. Now imagine the opposite: physically different, socially rejected, with nothing left to lose. These were medieval Europe's chosen truth-tellers. Courts didn't recruit jesters from the beautiful or successful. They hunted society's margin, dwarfs, whose stunted bodies marked them as freaks, hunchbacks, whose twisted spines branded them as cursed, the mentally different, whose strange thoughts made others uncomfortable, and the socially exiled, whose very existence challenged conventional norms. This wasn't cruel entertainment, it was strategic genius. When you've been mocked your entire life, additional mockery loses its sting. When society has already rejected you, you have nothing left to lose by rejecting it back. When your physical difference marks you as other, you develop the psychological distance to see what conformists cannot. These outcasts possessed something our comfort-obsessed culture has forgotten: authentic fearlessness born from genuine suffering. Today's social media personalities craft their image obsessively, terrified of losing followers, sponsors, or social approval. They speak in sanitized corporate speak, afraid to offend anyone because their livelihood depends on universal acceptance. They've never experienced real rejection, so they live in constant fear of it. Medieval jesters had already survived society's worst cruelty. Physical deformity, mental difference, and social exile had forged them into something unbreakable. They weren't performing for acceptance. They were already beyond that need. While modern personalities desperately chase validation through perfectly filtered selfies and crowd-pleasing content, jesters wielded their outsider status like a weapon. Their difference wasn't a weakness to hide. It was armor that made them invincible. The darkest irony: in seeking universal acceptance, we've created a generation too fragile for universal truth.
In the rigid hierarchy of medieval court, jesters occupied an impossible position. They were simultaneously the lowest and highest-ranking individuals in the room. Officially, they ranked below stable boys and kitchen servant. Unofficially, they wielded more influence over kings than dukes, bishops, or military commanders. This wasn't an accident. It was the most sophisticated power strategy ever devised. While nobles competed for titles, land, and formal recognition, jesters discovered something revolutionary. True influence flows to those who appear to want none. By embracing complete powerlessness, they became untouchable. Kings who would execute advisors for unwelcome counsel would laugh at jesters delivering identical truths wrapped in jest. Modern power seekers have forgotten this ancient wisdom. They chase corner offices, social media followings, and public recognition, all external symbols that actually limit their influence. Every promotion makes them more cautious, every title more vulnerable, every public position more restrictive. Jesters mastered invisible influence through calculated vulnerability. They used self-deprecating humor to disarm hostility, making audiences feel superior before delivering devastating insights. They employed misdirection, appearing to mock themselves while actually critiquing their listeners. Their emotional intelligence allowed them to read room dynamics instantly, knowing precisely when to push boundaries and when to retreat. Consider their technique of wise foolishness, appearing simple-minded while exposing complex hypocrisy. A jester might stumble through an apparently innocent story about a greedy merchant, leaving audiences to realize they'd just heard a scathing indictment of the king's tax policies. The critique landed because it seemed accidental, unintentional, harmless. Today's power players announce their intentions, defend their positions, and fight for recognition. They've missed the jester's fundamental insight. The moment you appear to want power, you've already lost it. While modern executives climb corporate ladders and influencers chase metrics, they remain prisoners of their own ambitions. Jesters understood what we've forgotten. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from embracing apparent weakness, and the most devastating truth arrives disguised as harmless laughter.
Imagine waking up every morning knowing that your survival depends on making your potential executioner laugh. Not once, not occasionally, but constantly, creatively, while walking the razor's edge between entertainment and treason. This was the jester's daily reality, a psychological marathon that would shatter most modern minds within hours. Every moment in court was performance under extreme pressure. Jesters faced constant physical abuse disguised as entertainment, being pelted with food, kicked for amusement, or beaten for comic effect. Nobles viewed this brutality as hilarious. The jester's pain was their pleasure. Yet jesters couldn't flinch, couldn't show genuine hurt, couldn't break character, even while being literally broken. The mental gymnastics required were staggering. They had to simultaneously monitor the king's mood, assess political undercurrents, gauge audience reactions, craft spontaneous wit, and calculate every word's potential consequences, all while enduring physical torment and maintaining a cheerful facade. Modern people crumble under far less. A harsh performance review triggers therapy sessions. Social media criticism launches mental health crises. Workplace tension requires stress leave. We've become so psychologically fragile that jesters' daily routine would hospitalize us. How did they survive? Through psychological techniques we've forgotten. Jesters mastered compartmentalization, separating their performing self from their authentic core. The bruises, mockery, and humiliation happened to their fool persona, not their real identity. They developed supernatural emotional detachment, viewing their suffering as theater, rather than reality. Their timing was surgical. They learned to read micro-expressions, vocal tone, and body language to know exactly when to push boundaries and when to retreat. They could sense when a king's laughter masked rage, when noble's amusement hid plotting, when the room's energy shifted toward danger. Most remarkably, they learned to laugh at their own suffering, not as defeat, but as victory. Each beating endured while maintaining humor proved their unbreakable strength. Pain became their badge of honor, proof they were stronger than their tormentors. While we need safe spaces and trigger warnings, jesters transformed the most unsafe space imaginable into their domain of power.
Modern activists storm stages with megaphone, demanding immediate change through moral outrage. Medieval jesters achieved far more with a single raised eyebrow and a perfectly timed stumble. The difference? Jesters understood that confronting power directly triggers defensive rage, while appearing harmless allows devastating truths to slip past psychological barriers undetected. Their arsenal was sophisticated beyond modern comprehension. Allegory allowed them to critique kings through innocent fables about tyrannical animals. Wordplay buried subversive meanings in seemingly nonsensical rhymes that audiences decoded hours later. Physical comedy let them literally act out society's absurdities, making corruption visible through exaggerated mimicry. The crown jewel was fool's wisdom, deliberately appearing simple-minded while delivering complex insights. A jester might ask naive questions like, why do the king's friends always discover gold mines after dinner? The apparent innocence protected them from retaliation while exposing bribery more effectively than any formal accusation. Today's truth-tellers have forgotten this fundamental principle. You must protect your audience's ego while dismantling their worldview. Modern protesters attack people's intelligence, morality, and choices directly, triggering immediate psychological defense mechanisms that shut down all learning. Jesters never made their audience feel stupid or evil. Instead, they positioned themselves as the fool, letting others feel superior while gradually revealing uncomfortable truths. They understood that people can only hear criticism they don't realize is criticism. Strategic timing was crucial. Jesters delivered their harshest truths when audiences were relaxed, entertained, and off guard, never during moments of tension or conflict. They made people laugh first, think second, and only realize they'd been criticized much later. While modern rebels sacrifice persuasion for righteousness, jesters chose effectiveness over ego. They understood that changing minds requires patience, humility, and tactical brilliance, qualities our age of instant gratification has abandoned. The ultimate irony, by appearing powerless and foolish, they accomplished what our most passionate activists cannot. They made truth irresistible rather than threatening.
Economic security is a modern luxury that medieval jesters never possessed. They lived one bad joke away from poverty, one royal mood swing from execution, one political shift from exile. Their entire livelihood depended on the whims of people who could legally murder them for entertainment. This terrifying vulnerability forged them into economic survivors that would shame today's most successful entrepreneurs. Jesters never relied on single income sources. While officially employed by one court, they secretly cultivated relationships with rival nobles, foreign dignitaries, and merchant guild. They sold information, arranged introductions, and provided private entertainment, all while maintaining plausible deniability. Their network wasn't professional networking, it was survival architecture. They developed portable skills that transcended any single employer. Music, storytelling, acrobatics, and wit could be monetized anywhere. Unlike modern specialists trapped in narrow career paths, jesters became masters of adaptability. They could entertain peasants in taverns or diplomats in palaces with equal skill. Most crucially, they maintained constant escape plan. Every jester knew which roads led to friendly territory, which ships sailed to distant courts, which allies would harbor fugitives. They lived in perpetual readiness to disappear completely and rebuild elsewhere. Modern workers expect job security, predictable salaries, and safety nets. When layoffs occur, they spiral into despair. When industries shift, they demand retraining programs. When markets crash, they seek government bailouts. Economic uncertainty triggers mental health crises and victim narratives. Jesters faced far worse with unbreakable composure. They transformed economic terror into strategic advantage, using their expendability as motivation for constant innovation. Knowing they could be replaced tomorrow made them irreplaceable today. Their precarious position created what modern comfort has destroyed: true resilience. While we seek stability, they thrived in chaos. While we demand security, they found strength in vulnerability. Economic uncertainty didn't break jesters, it forged them into the most adaptable professionals in history.
The most disturbing truth about medieval jesters isn't that they endured constant humiliation, it's that they learned to thrive on it. While modern people require therapy after harsh performance reviews, jesters transformed daily degradation into their source of strength. This challenges everything we believe about human psychology and resilience. Every day brought fresh torments. Nobles would force jesters to eat scraps like dogs, use them as human furniture, or beat them for entertainment. They were spat on, kicked, mocked, and treated as subhuman toys. Yet rather than breaking under this abuse, jesters developed psychological mechanisms that made them virtually indestructible. They reframed every humiliation as performance art. When forced to crawl like an animal, they turned it into elaborate comedy that made audiences laugh at their own cruelty. When beaten, they incorporated the violence into physical routines that demonstrated their toughness. Pain became their stage, degradation their script. Most remarkably, they found identity in their unique position. While others defined themselves through social approval, jesters derived self-worth from their ability to endure what would destroy normal people. Their capacity for suffering became their badge of honor, their resilience their greatest achievement. Modern culture teaches us that external validation determines internal worth. We need likes, praise, and social acceptance to feel valuable. Criticism devastates us because we've built our identities on others' opinions. Jesters developed something we've lost, an unshakable core identity that no external force could touch. The worse their treatment, the stronger their sense of self became. They understood that true power comes from independence of spirit, not approval from others. Their lowest moments became proof of their highest strengths. Each survived humiliation, demonstrated their superiority over their tormentors, who needed to inflict suffering to feel powerful. While we crumble under minor slights, jesters transformed major abuse
into personal victory. They discovered what our comfort-obsessed culture cannot fathom, that human dignity isn't granted by others. It's forged in the furnace of adversity and emerges unbreakable. While modern professionals collect LinkedIn connections and Instagram followers, medieval jesters built something infinitely more valuable: intelligence network that could save their lives. Jesters weren't isolated entertainers. They were the medieval world's most sophisticated information brokers, operating a shadow communication system that spanned continents. Their unique position granted access everywhere. As harmless entertainment, they moved freely between hostile courts, enemy territories, and rival kingdoms. Nobles who would torture official spies for information chatted openly around jesters, treating them as living furniture, incapable of understanding important matters. This was their greatest deception. Jesters possessed photographic memories for political detail, personal scandal, and strategic secret. They memorized troop movements discussed over dinner, love affairs whispered in corridors, and financial deals negotiated behind closed doors. Information was their currency, survival their motivation. They operated informal diplomatic networks that official ambassadors couldn't imagine. A jester expelled from one court would arrive at rivals' gates with detailed intelligence about their enemies' weaknesses, military preparation, and internal conflicts. This information earned them protection, employment, and valuable allies. Their relationships transcended simple networking. These bonds were forged through shared understanding of society's brutal reality, mutual dependence for survival, and genuine respect for each other's skill. When a jester needed sanctuary, these networks activated immediately. No questions asked, no favors tracked, just instant, life-saving assistance. Modern networking is transactional and shallow. We connect through algorithms, maintain relationships through social media and expect professional benefits without personal investment. Our networks collapse under pressure because they're built on convenience, not necessity. Jesters created bonds through blood, sweat, and shared secrets. They understood something we've forgotten. Real relationships require vulnerability, mutual risk, and genuine interdependence. While our digital connections provide the illusion of community, jesters built actual survival systems. Their networks weren't about career advancement. They were about staying alive in a world that wanted them dead. When crisis struck, our followers disappear. When jesters faced execution, their networks moved heaven and earth to save them.
The romantic image of the wise jester speaking truth to power conceals a devastating reality. They paid prices that would terrify modern truth-seekers into permanent silence. Jesters sacrificed everything most people consider essential for human happiness, and they did so knowingly, willingly, as the cost of their calling. Complete social isolation was their first sacrifice. Normal relationships became impossible when your identity was performance, when authenticity was a luxury you couldn't afford, when every conversation was potential intelligence gathering. Jesters couldn't form genuine friendships because everyone was either a patron to please, a rival to outmaneuver, or a source to cultivate. Love relationships were particularly tragic. How do you trust someone when survival depends on never dropping your mask? The psychological toll was staggering. Living in constant performance mode gradually eroded their authentic selves until they weren't sure where the jester ended and the person began. Many reported losing touch with their real emotions, their genuine desires, even their original personalities. The role consumed them. They endured chronic stress that would hospitalize modern people.
Every word carried life or death consequences. Every performance was a potential execution. Every audience was a jury that could sentence them without trial. They lived decades under pressure that breaks most people in weeks. Most tragically, they sacrificed conventional happiness, family, stability, peaceful old age, and simple human dignity. They chose truth-telling over comfort, independence over security, and integrity over acceptance. Modern people claim to value truth, but we won't pay these prices. We want to speak truth without social consequences, challenge power without personal risk, and maintain integrity without sacrificing comfort. We seek truth-telling that enhances rather than destroys our lives. Jesters understood what we refuse to acknowledge. Meaningful truth-telling requires sacrificing the very things that make life pleasant. They chose significance over happiness, influence over love, and legacy over personal fulfillment. They possessed tragic wisdom we lack, understanding that some truths can only be spoken by those who have nothing left to lose, and that gaining the freedom to speak often costs everything worth living for. The haunting question remains: what are we actually willing to sacrifice for our stated principles?
The uncomfortable truth about our supposed truth-loving society is this: we've become too psychologically soft to handle the truth-telling that democracy desperately needs. Could you wake up tomorrow knowing your livelihood depends on publicly challenging powerful people? Could you endure daily social media attacks, career threats, and personal destruction while maintaining your message? Could you find strength when society labels you a dangerous outsider? Most of us already know the answer. We've witnessed what happens to modern truth-tellers who dare challenge accepted narratives. They face coordinated attacks, economic destruction, and social exile. Yet they crumble under pressures that jesters faced as routine occupational hazards. Our comfort-trained minds simply lack the psychological armor medieval outcasts developed through necessity. But jesters' techniques aren't lost. They're waiting for rediscovery. Start building emotional independence by separating your self-worth from others' opinion. Practice strategic vulnerability by admitting your flaws before others can weaponize them. Develop multiple income streams so no single entity controls your survival. Create genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than social convenience. Most importantly, embrace the jester's fundamental insight. True power comes through appearing powerless. Stop fighting for recognition and start fighting for effectiveness. Use humor to disarm hostility. Employ questions instead of accusation. Make people think they're discovering uncomfortable truths themselves. The jester's tragic wisdom applies perfectly to our digital age. Meaningful truth-telling requires sacrifice. You cannot challenge power while remaining comfortable, speak difficult truths while staying popular, or maintain integrity while seeking universal approval. Here's the provocative question haunting our fragmented democracy. Have we become so dependent on safety, comfort, and social validation that we've lost the psychological strength necessary for genuine discourse? Our institutions are failing, our public conversations are poisoned, and our leaders face no meaningful accountability. We desperately need modern jesters, truth-tellers with the courage to speak uncomfortable realities and the resilience to survive the backlash. The question isn't whether we need their wisdom, it's whether we possess the strength to reclaim it. In an age of endless comfort, have we forgotten that some truths can only be spoken by those willing to lose everything?